Mike Tomlin's not backing down from Matt Canada as the offensive coordinator, despite all the criticisms coming from outside. We'll talk about that decision, what goes into Matt Canada, the play calls, Kenny Pickett, all of that, and the Steelers' decisions and how they're moving forward. Also talking about the pass rush that hasn't been existent too much lately. Lots of things for the Steelers correct right here on the Locked On Steelers podcast. We talk about a bunch of them. Joining me today is Wes Euler of Steeler Nation Radio. I'm Chris Carter, your host of Locked On Steelers. Let's get into it.
You are Locked On Steelers, your daily Pittsburgh Steelers podcast, part of the Locked On Podcast Network, your team every day.
And welcome to the Locked On Steelers podcast. I'm your host, Chris Carter, bringing you your daily dose of all things of the Pittsburgh Steelers. As always, you can find the show on Apple, Spotify, Google Podcasts, Odyssey, and YouTube. If you're watching this video on YouTube, hit the like button on this video if you enjoyed it. So hit the subscribe button to our YouTube channel to get all of our daily Monday through Friday episodes, as well as our bonus content whenever we have time to release it. We thank you for making the Locked On Steelers podcast your first listen every day. Today's episode is brought to you and sponsored by Betterhelp. It's not a crisis line. It's not self-help. It's professional therapy done securely online, available to people worldwide. And they have a special offer for our listeners. Get 10% off your first month at betterhelp.com/lockedon. That's betterhelp.com/lockedon. Join me today, as I said earlier, Wes Euler, Steeler Nation Radio. He's a regular on this show. Wes, we thank you for coming through as always. How you been, man?
What's up, partner? Doing well. Can't complain. I mean, I guess I could complain, but that's all we've done over the last 4 weeks. So
I was going
why
to say,
continue?
you just want to join the rest of Steelers fans just to complain about everything?
Nah, I mean, that's not my style. Come on. Life's good. Look around. Look at the beautiful foliage. Touch some grass. Kiss your family members. All right. Perspective.
No, I feel you on that, Wes. And it actually is nice weather in Pittsburgh. But there were a lot of Steelers fans who were not feeling Mike Tomlin, not coming out and lambasting Matt Canada, saying, talking about, saying, hey, I shoulder some of the blame here as far as, the play calls, or I do some of the play calls. Not even saying that there's blame to shoulder in that department. But, Mike Tomlin people are talking about, criticisms for him. He's talking about patience. He's talking about, he still believes in him. And there's that there. And I think a lot of people are like, oh man, Mike Tomlin, why aren't you calling for his head and all this other stuff? And I'm just sitting here like, Wes, he never was going to. It's not the Steelers' way to do that. And again, like, I think one thing that people overlook in this whole situation, it's not the best of moves to get rid of the offensive coordinator in the middle of your rookie quarterback season when he's just trying to get used to the NFL.
Yeah, there's a lot to unpack there. Let me start with where you finished. You're absolutely right. No matter what we all think about Matt Canada, no matter how bad a majority of this fan base wants him gone, right now, stability isn't a bad thing for Kenny Pickett. It's just not. Listen, I'm going to harken back to an example that I'm sure a lot of people remember here. Baker Mayfield, his rookie season, comes in week 3, I believe it was, right? In the middle of the game, kind of like Kenny Pickett did. Mm-hmm. Pickett was week 4, but Baker was week 3, and he broke rookie passing records. And everyone was super high on Baker Mayfield, but then what happened? He had 6 coaches in 5 years.
Yep.
That's just, and don't get me wrong, I was never the biggest Baker Mayfield believer, but any quarterback is going to struggle in that lack of continuity. For Kenny Pickett, right now, you want to at least have some baseline of stability. And if that's Matt Canada for 12 more games, it's Matt Canada for 12 more games. But you're absolutely right. Mike Tomlin, a lot of coaches in the NFL will pass the blame. They will, for lack of a better term, they'll throw some of their guys, some of their coordinators at times under the bus. Mike Tomlin's just never going to do that. Mike Tomlin could be steaming mad at Matt Canada. Mike Tomlin could be sitting there thinking, man, I really fudged up. I should have cut bait with this guy last year when Ben was gone, right? Or maybe we should have gone outside of the organization after Randy Fichtner and brought in somebody else, whatever. He could be thinking that. He's not going to go to his press conference and cut down one of his guys.
Yeah.
He's just not going to do that. That's not in Mike Tomlin's DNA. Like you said, that's not in the Steelers' DNA. I'm sure Mr. Rooney wouldn't appreciate that. And everybody can have their opinion on that. I'm not saying that you have to agree, that you have to feel that way. If you're apoplectic and you think we're 1-4 and we've lost 4 straight games, and particularly on offense, nothing's really going well, right? You're averaging 18 points a game or whatever it is over the last 2 years with Matt Canada, 18-something, I believe is the number. I get frustration with that. I get anger with that. But if you were expecting Mike Tomlin to come out today and throw a bunch of people under the bus or pass the blame or whatever, I don't think you were being realistic. That's not going to happen. Again, particularly when it's still early October and you got a lot of football left to play. You've got to figure some things out. And as cliche and corny as it might sound, you don't want to pull everybody apart in this moment. You want to galvanize them in a way.
Right. And I think that's part of where Mike Tomlin's strengths have always been, is that, Mike Tomlin doesn't hit panic buttons. At least publicly, like he definitely does stress things like, when the Steelers got destroyed by the Bengals last year, they talked about how, like, hey, there was a big, a message sent from him. And the Steelers, I think when you look back over the years when they've gotten beaten up badly by someone, they've responded to it, with a stronger performance, or they've gotten better from it. But Mike Tomlin, and in Tuesday's press conference, he said he's not going to make change for the sake of change. He won't shoot a hostage, quote unquote. Also, says he'll make changes if he feels like it'll produce a better desired outcome. But I think the point is that for those people that think that, it's as simple as just firing this guy, I don't think that's it at all, because there are opportunities out there. Again, I watched the All-22 as well as you could say that Kenny Pickett played in a game that he lost by 35 points when he was the starting quarterback. And I think he had poise. I think he had a plan for a lot of the times, but there were still plenty of plays that he left out there. Like, one of his pass, I brought this up in yesterday's podcast, his pass to Zach Gentry that went like 10 or 11 yards or whatever. Chase Claypool's wide open in the middle part of the field. And again, people are saying, why don't the Steelers use the middle part of the field? So I don't think it's a play calling thing sometimes. I think it's just hey, the quarterback saw this and just didn't see that. And, you had Ben Roethlisberger, who career-wise was not a great surveyor of the field. He was more of a gunslinger that just figured it out and just came up in big moments. Mitch Trubisky, never was a good surveyor of the field. Kenny Pickett, you're hoping he can develop into that. He was that for Pitt. It's a different thing to do it in the NFL, but these are things that have to come along and take time. And I think it's a struggle to find that balance when it's an offense without a bread and butter right now. Yes. You don't have a pass play, a run play that you can go to that you're like, this is getting me 5-10 yards every time we call it.
Yeah, there's no, all right, here's what we're going to do. We're going to go find Jordan Addison on this play, Kenny, right? And get him the ball, and he's going to make a play, and the two of you together are going to figure this out. There is no identity to this offense. I think that's the biggest problem with the offensive side of the football, and maybe this team in general, is there's not one thing you can hang your hat on offense. Now, maybe you're starting to get there with Kenny a little bit and his just absolute pinpoint accuracy. I mean, that's the one thing that I really took away from Buffalo. Outside of a couple throws, man, is he accurate. That throw that Deontay Johnson just didn't get a toe tap on. He's so accurate. It's insane. I mean, it's very impressive early on. It's only 6 quarters, but that's one thing that's really standing out here early on. So maybe with that, you can start to develop something that you can hang your hat on. But I think a lot of us, the optimism around this team coming into this season was they're going to have an elite defense, and they're going to be able to at least run the football at a league average clip. Well, the defense has 6 of its opening day starters out of the 11 right now, and the offense has not been able to run the ball. In fact, they've been dreadful in that category. Mm-hmm. You combine that with some inconsistencies from your wide receivers. You combine that with some injuries now to Pat Freiermuth and Zach Gentry. And what you're seeing here is a product of that. But that is the biggest thing for me. Going forward in these next couple weeks, you got some big games. You're at home against Tampa Bay and then Miami and then Philly, and then you got the bye week. So if you look at those 3 games and then the bye week, these next 4 weeks, the Steelers really have to find something that they can hang their hat on offense. Whether it's the Pickett to Pickens connection that looks like it's starting to develop. Hopefully Pat Freiermuth is healthy and returns, and maybe there's something there. Maybe it's Jaylen Warren, who has really shown some flashes of like he belongs and has a role in this offense. But you have to find something to generate some momentum on that side of the football. And they've done the opposite of that. And like I said, it's been better certainly the last 6 quarters since Kenny's been in there. I don't think anybody can deny that. But you got to find a way to finish some of these drives. Yeah, Boswell had struggled in the uncharacteristic misses. And at that time, I think, Chris, it was easier to point to, man, Antonio Brown was just a monster down there in the end zone. They lost AB at that same time, right? It was when the whole Lev Bell saga was going on. They were really kind of trying to figure themselves out on offense. But now it's just become a pattern. And so maybe you could excuse it a little bit in 2019 because you lost Antonio Brown, because Ben Roethlisberger was out for the season in the second game of the year. But even throughout that stretch in 2020 when they started 11-0, even last year at times when they were doing things well, they still struggled in the red zone mightily. That's another thing, too, that they've got to figure out. It's a whole plethora of issues here. The run game, the ball security from the wide receivers, using the middle of the field more, all these things, success in the red zone. You need some elements of that to start to come together here in the next 3 or 4 weeks. And this team still has some chance to win some games. I'm not saying that they're going to go to the playoffs or anything like that, but we could certainly all be feeling much more optimistic about the future by the time we get to December and January if a few of those elements start to come together here. And it looks like you got the catalyst in Kenny Pickett. You just got to kind of figure everything else around him.
We'll get to more about what the Steelers need to do to get some help on offense and what they're going to do moving forward, and who might provide that help, because I do think that the Steelers, I talked about the receivers yesterday needing to be better playmakers and needing the help here because that's the position they've invested into. But what concepts, what things can they apply that are going to help bring forward the things that you and I were just talking about there, that maybe Mike Tomlin and Matt Canada can help with getting things going and finding that chemistry? We're talking about how a lot of help there, but the place that you can go to find better help is BetterHelp. So we're going to now have a word from our sponsor, BetterHelp. Life is full with twists and turns, and it's important to show up for yourself through it all. I've faced plenty of times in my life where I've tried to shoulder a lot of burdens, responsibilities, and take things all on by myself. But the times that I truly found, groundbreaking opportunities for myself to move forward in my life came from answers thanks to help from good therapists. And therapy is one way that has truly helped me. And this is where BetterHelp is here to help you. BetterHelp Online Therapy will assess your needs and can match you with your own licensed professional therapist in less than 48 hours. Talk about your personal experience whenever you're going with a therapist, and they're going to help you figure out, hey, how do I overcome these struggles in my life? What can I do better? How can I move forward? That's what BetterHelp is here to help you do. Organize your thoughts, find solutions when you're facing problems. It's not a crisis line. It's not self-help. It's professional therapy done securely online, available to people worldwide. You can log onto your account anytime and send a message to your therapist. With therapy, it can take a few tries to find the right fit for you, but that's where BetterHelp comes in. They make it easy and free to change therapists if needed. And they have a special offer for my listeners. Get 10% off your first month at betterhelp.com/lockedon. That's 10% off your first month of online therapy at BetterHelp when you visit BetterHelp, HELP.com/lockedon. Be sure to check out BetterHelp because they do help you find the answers. Back here on the Locked On Steelers podcast, I'm Chris Carter. He's Wes Euler. Wes, we're talking about things that can help this offense, and something that I asked Mike Tomlin about, what do they have to do to make things easier for Kenny Pickett? Because I also say, it's tough to really, one thing that you could help is obviously don't put him down 35 points to the number 2 defense in the NFL. And he was like,
give up a 98-yard touchdown on the third play of the game.
Exactly. And Mike was even like, yeah, that is a big part of it. We need to do everything better around him. But what are things that they can do in the game? Because Mike Tomlin also talked about other things that the Steelers are planning to do. And part of it is, you need guys to step up and do their jobs around him and make it so that there's not as much burden on him. But I do think that there were some semblances of things that were there. And one thing that Mike Tomlin said, he's like, when you're down that far, play action can't work. And when he said that, I was like, Mike Tomlin's thinking the same thing I'm thinking here, in that this team needs play action to be a major function of what gets things done for Kenny Pickett and open things up for Najee Harris. After a lot of those big passing gains, Najee Harris was able to get some plays because you saw those linebackers and safeties think a little bit like maybe we're going to get got here by the passing game of Kenny Pickett. But when eventually, it still isn't consistent enough on this offense to scare them that much, and they're going to still fly to get Najee Harris. Is that the biggest thing that needs to happen here, Wes? Does it need to be that the play action is just a better staple in this offense?
That's another thing that for years now, the resounding answer is yes. And, we could talk about all these different elements of the offense, right? But, yeah, point blank period, the number one thing right now that this offense can do to help itself, to help Kenny Pickett, to help the team, is run the football. Yeah. And not run the football like Nick Chubb in Cleveland, right?
You don't have those people up front.
Not run the football like Saquon Barkley and the Giants have been doing for the last few weeks, like Derrick Henry and the Titans do. But just run the football well enough that teams actually have to respect it, which they haven't had to do against the Steelers since James Conner in 2018. Yeah. I mean, it's been a long time since the Steelers' run game really commanded attention and respect. And that's a massive issue, particularly when you're breaking in a rookie quarterback, particularly when you've got some wide receivers right now that are struggling and aren't playing their best. So the run game is the catalyst of all this for the offense, I think. Yeah, we can talk about the wide receivers. Deontay Johnson's got to be better. Chase Claypool's got to be better. I think it's time to see more Pickens. I hope it's time soon to see what Calvin Austin has in that regard as well, too. You need more from the offensive line. You need more, health-wise considered, from your tight ends in the middle of the field. But this all gets back to running the football. The offensive line has been much improved in pass protection. Whether you just want to look at numbers and analytics or whether you want to cut on the film and use your eyeballs, the offensive line has been not elite, but they have certainly been good enough in pass protection. I would say in the top half of the league.
Yeah, I agree with that assessment.
Run game, though, they're struggling. Najee's struggling, and it's bringing down everything that they're trying to do on offense. It's handcuffing them in a lot of ways. And listen, we've been having these same conversations. I mean, Chris, for the last 2 off seasons, everyone from Mike Tomlin to Kevin Colbert and Omar Khan to Mr. Rooney, they have talked about how we have to run the football better. We have to. I mean, when your owner is using that as an answer in questions where the team needs to improve during the offseason, that's when you know, because owners usually don't shoot it that straight. They'll give you some political, right. some wide range answer. And Mr. Rooney, the last 2 off seasons, where's this team need to improve? We need to run the football more consistently. To Kevin Colbert, Omar Khan, Mike Tomlin, and on down the list. It's easier said than done, but there has been little to no progress in that regard. All these other things that we're talking about can help, certainly. Red zone and more from your wide receivers and all these different things. And Kenny Pickett continuing to grow and get more comfortable with what they're asking him to do. But if you can't run the football or at least make your opponent think that you're going to be able to run the football, you're going to struggle to launch. I mean, you just are. That's life in the National Football League. You don't have to be able to run the football at an elite level. Look at the Bills. Look at the Chiefs. Look at the Rams. They don't run the football at an elite level, but they can do it when they need to, enough to make you respect it and enough to use it at the end of games to close down victories as well, too. Maybe not so much the Rams this season, but during their Super Bowl campaign last year. The Cincinnati Bengals last year as well, too, right? Yeah, it was about Burrow and Jamar Chase and T. Higgins and Tyler Boyd, but they could lean on Joe Mixon when they needed to as well. The Steelers have not had that for a long time, and it makes you incredibly one-dimensional and predictable on offense.
It does, and I think that's the biggest thing about it. And Mike Tomlin talked about being predictable, and because part of it's also with running the football, you need to be able to pass to set up the run, run to set up the pass, and that's when you find those strengths. And especially when you don't have an Antonio Brown, a Le'Veon Bell, a superstar on the that is established and that people fear immediately. There's guys that people respect. People respect Najee Harris, even without his production. And we'll get to that in just a second here. But, people respect it. People respect, I think people are starting to respect George Pickens. But there's a different kind of respect when you've been beating people with that a lot and a lot and a lot. And there's double teams and there's everything else. Josh Carney, you can find him on Twitter by Josh Carney. He tweeted out something very, very interesting that I retweeted and he and I both agreed upon. A lot of people are talking about, well, Jaylen Warren, he's hitting holes faster. He's getting more yards per carry. He's getting down the field faster. He just hits the hole harder. He just looks more aggressive, Chris. And I'm like, it's easier to do that when there's not 3 defenders behind the line of scrimmage that you have to dodge the way Najee Harris is, because people are attacking downfield. It's not even that they're stacking the box. Just look at the way that they attack the line of scrimmage when Najee Harris is there versus Jaylen Warren. And Josh's point, and he pointed this out, looking at advanced stats, Najee Harris on 69 carries averages just 0.74 yards before contact on his carries. That means that he is getting contacted before he can get a yard beyond the line of scrimmage, which means average he's being met at the line of scrimmage right there. I mean, that's not even a full yard that he's getting met there.
And you see that in his game.
And you see that. I mean,
Chris, he looks like one of these quarterbacks that's been hit too much and is just expecting it now. Like, do you remember, this is going to be for you older heads, all right? Mm-hmm. But you remember what David Carr looked like in the pocket?
Oh, yeah.
You remember what Tim Couch looked like in the pocket? I mean, those guys, their offensive lines were so bad, they would drop back to pass, and it was like they were bracing for contact right away every single time, and it wrecked them. There's a little bit of that going on with Najee Harris right now, where he gets the ball, he looks up, and it's like he's just expecting to be hit right away.
And he's getting it right away. Like
most of the time he is,
yeah.
And when he isn't, he's looking for it, and that's the half step slowing him down, and that is not allowing him to hit the holes in the the few occasions that they are actually there. It's just it's a bad combination right now.
It's a bad combination. And again, with Jaylen Warren, the first time he gets contacted is by average 2.21 yards downfield. And that's not amazing, but it gives him a chance to build up some steam to attack forward. And this is what play action does. When the Steelers hit on a play action pass and it backs off guys, it gives Najee Harris a little bit of space, and that's when you see his most successful runs. But I think it's part of what, if there's a criticism to be had of Matt Canada, I think you got to stop running on first and second down sometimes. And he didn't do that the entire game, but there were just times when he did it where I felt Steelers fans' frustration, like, hey, you can't punish people with this offense just yet. You can't just lay on people like Pitt. I cover Pitt football. They know that they have offense.
This isn't Izzy against Virginia Tech.
Exactly. Like Pitt just ran the ball 28 times to 7 passes in the second half because they knew they could just bully the Hokies down the field. And it's just you're not doing that. Like, you don't have that offensive line. And maybe someday they will. That's someday down the line when they invest into that group. But the way that you open up the run when you don't have the blockers up front, the linemen that you've invested into, is by working the pass game. And again, it comes from play action, it comes from timing, it comes from setting things up and keeping the defenders on a balance there and stopping them from being attacking. Because when Jaylen Warren gets the ball, the reason he's getting those yards, because no one's looking for him. They're flat-footed. I mean, go back and look at some of his biggest rushes and compare them to some of Najee Harris's rushes where, Ed Oliver and, Milano and everyone's in the backfield trying to get Najee Harris. And when Jaylen Warren gets the ball, the linebackers are like, oh, wait, that's right, he's here. And they forget that he's even a factor because they're too worried about Pat Freiermuth or George Pickens or Deontay Johnson or Chase Claypool. And Jaylen Warren is way down that list. You game plan for that in film room. That's what that's about.
No, you're absolutely right. I can't say it any better. And again, you can look at other examples of teams that have been able to do that successfully. Everyone last year talked about how bad the Bengals' offensive line was. But why were they still able to run the football with Joe Mixon? Because you back everybody off with what you're able to do in the pass game. Listen, the Steelers right now, they don't have newsflash. They don't have Jamar Chase and T. Higgins and Tyler Boyd. All right, so I'm not saying they're going to do that all of a sudden right away, but you've got to find some practical remedies here, and that feels like the most realistic one, at least in the next 2-3 weeks here, while you're trying to find something to hang your hat on.
We're going to flip over to the defense to talk about the pass rush because I also asked Mike Tomlin about that. We'll get to that in just a minute here on the Locked On Steelers podcast. But first, we got to talk to you guys about BetOnline. BetOnline is your number one source for all your betting stats and sports information. Do go to BetOnline because with all the greatest sports developments, you got the playoffs. What crazy plays. You got the Houston Astros winning. If you were paying attention to BetOnline, you might have won yourself some money by all that. But you got baseball playoffs are here. NBA and NHL are about to start up. The NFL is into week 6. All the different ways to make money by going to BetOnline, your number one source and your continued source for all your sports wagering information. Be sure on live betting, playoffs, esports, and more. Head to their website today or check them out on their mobile device to view all the trends in the action when you visit BetOnline, where the game starts. Back here on the Locked On Steelers podcast, I'm Chris Carter. He's Wes Euler. We gotta finish a little bit faster here because I went over my time a little bit. But Wes, I want to talk about this pass rush. The only person who had a QB hit on Josh Allen on Sunday was Minkah Fitzpatrick. And Mike Tomlin talked about like, hey, that's also the
and
Bills.
That was on the third play. That was on the third play of the game, right? On the 98-yard pass.
That was because they tried to trick it up. They said, hey, let's send Minka Fitzpatrick. He's a playmaker. Maybe he forces something there, and maybe Trey Norwood doesn't bite on a crossing route and get beat deep. But things happen. But still, I asked Mike Tomlin about this. Like, how much is that? You guys need to scheme guys up better versus they need to win their one-on-ones. And he said, first of all, let's acknowledge the Bills are very good at that. Mm-hmm. Josh Allen is great at managing that situation. But he talked about it. There is some versions of winning one-on-ones. There is some of it that has to do with that. And frankly, you got guys. I went over this in my grades segment on Tuesdays, Wes, but. You had Chris Wormley and Montrevious Adams out there for a lot of snaps, no tackles from either one of them, and no pressures, no nothing. You need guys up front to be able to create something, and they're just not getting it right now. They need them to beat their one-on-ones, and maybe this gets set up whenever TJ Watt returns. Jerry Dulac of the Pittsburgh Post-Gazette says that won't come until after the bye week. I think that's the best move. Get him healthy, even if he says he's ready before then. But to me, this does come down to you. Hey, guys, you got to beat people. We can call up, call play calls, where all of that. You got to get off your blocks. You got to get into the backfield and get after guys. They'll face Tom Brady, and not that he's easy to get down, but because he gets the ball out quick.
He's not Josh Allen.
He's not Josh Allen, and this is where I think that you got to do better and force him to get the ball out quicker.
Yeah, because if you can't do it against Tom Brady, you might be in trouble because we don't know who's going to be quarterbacking for the Dolphins, but they're all mobile. Then you got Jalen Hurts the next week. He's pretty mobile.
Yeah.
And it's not getting any easier after that. Chris, last year this team had 7 guys, I believe, who had multiple sacks.
Yep.
And obviously TJ Watt and Cam Heyward were the guys, the catalysts of that, the guys who were stirring that drink. But you're right. You need more from Wormley. You need more from Reed. He's been too invisible to this point. You got to be encouraged from what you're seeing from DeMarvin Leal. But, yeah, listen, Highsmith has shown flashes, but there could be more consistency there. Cam Heyward is dealing with a lot of attention, but he still could do more. You certainly need more from Chris Wormley, who I don't think has a quarterback hit this year even. He doesn't have a sack. He doesn't have a QB hit. You need more from those guys because you were getting contributions from everywhere last year, and now it's just kind of been Highsmith and nobody else really. This defense is predicated on being able to get after the quarterback. I don't think any of us expected that to be at the elite level without TJ Watt, but they also shouldn't be in the bottom of the barrel right now.
And that's what it looks like there. Now, you still have Alex Highsmith with 5.5 sacks, even though he didn't get a sack in this game. But looking at pressures, you're right. Chris Wormley doesn't have a quarterback hit on his register. But, Alex Highsmith, 18 pressures. Cam Heyward, 14. But then Larry Ogunjobi, 8. And then next is Malik Reed with 7, but you need more guys than that. You need guys to be able to step up. Tyson Alualu, and I know he's old and he's kind of out of the question there, but Chris Wormley only has 3 on the season. And DeMarvin Leal, he's working his way in. I give him a break, but he's came up. But Montrevious Adams, he's played 40 pass rush snaps. He has 1 pressure all season. And I get that he was a practice squad.
That's supposed to be his bread and butter too.
It is. And he's not coming through. And part of this, Wes, are things that's like we could talk about what defense Terrell Austin needs to call, but these guys got to win their one-on-ones.
They do.
I do think that part of this stems back to this team is still kind of, a bit punch drunk from all the snaps they've had to play, and maybe they just need some time to recuperate. But that recuperation ain't coming for 3 more weeks, so they better get it done soon, or they're going to be 1-7 going into the bye.
You're right. And again, if it's not going to happen against Tom Brady, where he's going to stand in the pocket, and it's not like he's Josh Allen or Jalen Hurts or Lamar Jackson, if not this weekend, you might have to wait till TJ Watt gets back, and at that point, it'll be too late.
I agree. There's a lot of different things the Steelers have to do. We got crossover Thursday tomorrow with the host of Locked On Bucks, David Harris, and it's going to be a fun show. Wes, thanks so much for joining us. We got to get out of here. I'm your host, Chris Carter. Hey, check out Wes Steeler, Steeler Nation Radio, Ears and Beers podcast, In the Gun podcast. All you West Virginia fans, this man knows more about West Virginia football than pretty much anybody else out there. Check him out there. Check me out, Chris Carter, on Instagram and Twitter at Carter Critiques. Also, check out the Locked On Steelers podcast, Apple, Spotify, Google Podcasts, Odyssey, YouTube. Subscribe if you enjoyed the video. Like the video as well. Back on your screens and in your ears Thursday for crossover Thursday right here on the Locked On Steelers podcast.